Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. I want to speak directly this morning about several subjects. I want to begin with Iran. Yesterday, the President of the United States threatened to wipe Iran off the map. That's right, to destroy the country. This is hardly the kind of language one would expect from a President of the United States. I always quote Theodore Roosevelt, "Walk softly, but carry a big stick." Donald Trump seems to think the only way to get things moving is with that big stick. The important thing is that there is no ceasefire. And let's be clear about that. It is true that there was a de-escalation of tension between the United States and Iran in terms of military action. But take a look at what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. It is hardly a de-escalation. And yet, if you listened to Pete Hegseth this morning, the Secretary of Defense, or self-styled Secretary of War, why, you would think the ceasefire was holding. But we know that it is not. And we are faced with a dilemma. The President of the United States is determined and has said that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. Well, it was open, very briefly, in one particular lane for American ships. And the question is it open? So let's be blunt. It's not. We all know that for Iran, this is a critical aspect of this confrontation. They cannot surrender their authority over the Strait of Hormuz, or they have nothing left. I want you all to understand very clearly that Iran is a major issue. It needs to be understood, and Donald Trump's policy is not succeeding. We are not seeing a de-escalation of tension, and certainly we are not seeing a ceasefire. When the President of the United States can talk about wiping a nation off the face of the earth, that is hardly a de-escalation. And let's talk about Lebanon for a moment. Despite all of the talk of ceasefire, the war between Israel and Hezbollah continues. Hezbollah occupies parts of Lebanon, and they use that occupation to attack Israel. And the Israelis are saying, we're happy to have a peace with Lebanon, but first there must be a cessation by Hezbollah of what it's doing. This is not an unreasonable request. Indeed, the Israelis will continue to pummel Hezbollah as best they can. What will we do in Iran? Who knows? Because you understand and I understand, it really is up to one person, the President of the United States, who rules by whim. Do you understand that? His decisions make all the difference in the world. This is not a normal admission of foreign policy and goals and policies. It isn't normal because although in every administration a president makes the final decision, the real truth of the matter is that in this administration, Donald Trump holds all the cards. And frankly, I think that's a very dangerous thing. So you now must consider with me the future of American policy toward Iran. If things continued the way they seem to be going, it seems to me inevitable that hostilities will resume. And that, my friends, is the simple truth. There is a second subject that I want to deal with today, and that has to do with the Republican Party looking to redraw maps in numerous states after the decision by the Supreme Court on redistricting. The Republicans are desperate to hold on to the House. And so they are now attacking, if you will, democracy in state after state. This is important in Florida, which became the 8th state to enact new House districts ahead of midterm elections. That's because of Governor Ron DeSantis, who announced he had signed a redrawn map passed by lawmakers last week that could help Republicans retain control of a majority of House seats in Florida. The new map has been challenged, but who knows what will happen. There is a danger here in terms of American democracy. And I want to be crystal clear. Indiana is holding a primary today. There are members of the Indiana State Senate who refused to do what Donald Trump wanted on redrawing districts in Indiana. They now have challengers. And tomorrow, at this time, we will know the result of the election in Indiana. Will the Republicans of Indiana uphold Donald Trump's desire to redistrict Indiana, or will they reject it? It is a test for the Republican leadership in Indiana. And yet another critical moment. The Supreme Court restored broad access to an abortion pill. Now, it wasn't the final decision. It was simply a hold when the court imposed restrictions last week. The latest order will remain in effect for a week while both sides respond and the High Court will rule on the issue. It is important to note this was just a stay, and it was Justice Samuel Alito, one of the most conservative members of the court, who temporarily allowed women seeking abortion to obtain the pill at pharmacies or through the mail without any in-person visit to a doctor. I don't know what the Supreme Court will decide in the end, but I can tell you that I am familiar with students who have gotten pregnant, who have used the pill, this pill which allows for an abortion without any medical procedure. Now we have to see what will happen. There is another major political development today. Tonight, we will all be glued to our television sets here in California. CNN will host a so-called debate with the leading candidates for governor of California. Let's remember, please, that there is not a Democratic primary or a Republican primary. There is a free-for-all here in California. By the way, I personally favor the return to a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, where Democrats and Republicans can decide who they want their candidates to be. What we will see tonight on the stage at CNN are all of the candidates who are considered major candidates, Democrats and Republicans. I'm going to be watching very carefully. The question is, who will emerge tonight with enough traction to be one of the top two contenders? Let me emphasize this again. You could have two Republicans or two Democrats running against each other for governor. The simple truth is that only when you have Democratic primary and Republican primary separately do you end up with a real choice. So we're going to watch tonight. The polls show it at this moment to be extremely close. One thing intrigues me. Tom Steyer has spent millions and millions and millions of dollars, and he seems to be sinking in the polls. I don't know what you think of Tom Steyer, and frankly, I don't even know what I think of Tom Steyer, except the last thing I want to see is the governorship of California purchased by someone who can afford to spend multiple millions of dollars on his own campaign. No one should be able to buy the governorship of California. There is another critical question in this campaign, and we'll be watching tonight as the leading Republican candidate, Mr. Hilton, who all of us know because if you watch Fox, he was on Fox, as he emerges as the hand-picked candidate of Donald Trump. But understand, were he to emerge as the nominee, one of the two selected for the runoff, it would offer a fascinating contrast here in California. Whoever emerges from the Democratic side running against Hilton would create a fascinating situation because it would mean that there really would be a choice here in California. Let me point out that Donald Trump's endorsement did and does make a difference in terms of coalescing votes in this free-for-all, and that's what tonight is. So no doubt tomorrow, among other topics, we will be talking about what happened on the stage during this so-called debate over the California governorship. I did have a question from Stan, and Stan asked me, please answer this before the television production tonight. Why is who is governor of California so important? And I want to point this out very clearly and very precisely. Who is governor of California matters because whoever is governor is automatically a key contender for the presidency of the United States. That has been true in the case of every governor since Earl Warren in modern times. All of those who have been elected governor of California, Democrat or Republican, have proven to be formidable potential presidents of the United States. So we are going to watch carefully tonight, and so will you, I hope. And tomorrow we will offer some analysis. By the way, because it's not a debate, the real thing you look for is who made the biggest mistake. And if there are no mistakes, it shouldn't shift the voting trends, according to the polls, very much. So we're going to watch tonight. Xavier Becerra seems to be the emerging Democrat, former state attorney general, member of Barack Obama's cabinet. He seems to be the beneficiary of Swalwell's dropping out. And if he emerges as the Democrat, there is no doubt that he will be the next governor of California. One of the fascinating things about this open primary is there is a backlash, and I am part of that backlash in saying, please, let's have a ballot measure here in California to restore the sovereignty of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party in choosing candidates. Heaven forbid we should end up with two Republicans. That would be a fascinating thing and would certainly trigger a recall, which California has as it's one of its constitutional provisions. If a Republican were elected governor, there would most certainly be a recall. And you will recall we have had that happen here in California. I remember the former governor of California, Gray Davis, who was recalled, and you will recall that Arnold Schwarzenegger emerged as the winner. Now, I've spent a little bit of time here on politics. Oh, by the way, Schwarzenegger was the last Republican to be governor of California. Why have I spent this time balancing between foreign policy and domestic policy? Because, my friends, that is where we are today. As the Republicans look to redraw maps around the country, as California proceeds with the process of selecting the candidates to run off for governor of California, and as Iran continues to be a major issue. By the way, will the price of gasoline come up tonight? Because here in California, it's the most expensive gas in the country. That, too, is an issue. So many things to talk about. And that's why here on Around the Political World with John Rothman, we try to cover so much. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what we have talked about. You can write a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. And that includes questions. Although it's only Tuesday, Friday is fast approaching, and many of you have indicated how much you enjoy the question and answer session. So use the links to the notes to connect with me on social media. Please remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand, which is, of course, our goal. The show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on the advertising support that we have, and I expect that will increase in the days ahead. Who knows? I want to say a special word of thanks to Gogo Zoger, who is the producer of this podcast and does such a great job. Gogo, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, make sure you watch the program on CNN tonight beginning at 6 o'clock West Coast time, 9 o'clock East Coast time. And make sure that we follow what happens in Indiana as well, not to mention what happens in the Middle East. My goodness, there is a lot to talk about right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you tomorrow.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.